Okay, welcome to the webinar again. And like I was mentioning, the topic for these webinars for this month is God Alone. And it is in some ways based on this book of Sister Gyanamata. It's not a book of Sister Gyanamata, it's a compilation of her letters, some of which also are letters which she received from Master and she sent to Master. When I say Master, I mean Paramahansa Yogananda ji. And there are also many, many letters she wrote to her sister and brother disciples and other people who seeked counseling from her. And I wanted to also, summarize a little bit on what we had shared last week. But before that, I just wanted to, divulge a little bit or just go out of the track. What I was planning to go on was I wanted to mention a little bit about the music, and I wanted to thank Barakel for the music which he played. And I believe Premdas, Brahmachari Premdas will also be sharing something on music or some music we'll be playing today. And I just wanted to mention this is something which has been a lifesaver for me, which is Swami Kriyananda's music, because there's only so much one can meditate, there's so much one can read or watch videos on YouTube, but music is just such an uplifted way of feeling God's presence within us, and music meaning chanting, and of course the various songs which Swamiji gave us. So now coming back to God Alone, last week, of course, Devarshiji shared about Sister Gyanamata, and we heard some of her, you could say, iconic lines. One is, of course, being God alone, her words, and how our religion is tested in the cold, hard light of day. And Devarshiji also mentioned about her words, change no circumstance in my life, change me. So this is, I thought, a good place to kind of remind us of those words, because sometimes I myself need reminders, constant reminders that change no circumstance in my life, change me, because it's very convenient to change circumstances, or even more convenient to wish to change others. So I wanted to pick it up from there. And um, before we get into today's satsang, I wanted to re-emphasize about reading this book. If you have, I have enjoyed this book so much, and especially this week, this month, as we are, connecting on this topic of God alone. I've been reading different letters. I just randomly open a page, and there has never been a letter where I thought, oh, this does not apply to me, and flip the page. There's always been something which has, touched a chord, and that is how Sister Gyanamata's words are, just to the point. I mean, no, left or right. She just gets right to the point, right to business, as you may say it. So, I just wanted to begin by reading a letter from Sister Gyanamata, which she wrote to a devotee who had questions about how to cope with physical suffering. And this is from a chapter, or it is titled Suffering Can Be a Pathway to Greatness. So she writes, Dear blank, one answer will cover all your questions. Turn to God and fill your consciousness with the realization of His perfection. Let me read that line again. One answer will cover all your questions. Turn to God and fill your consciousness with the realization of His perfection. Now again, classic Sister Gyanamata, God alone. And now I'll read the rest of the letter. Let your weakness be dissolved in the worshipful thought of His strength. It is not necessary to explain things to God, for He knoweth your need before you speak, and is more ready to give than you are to ask. When you meditate, turn away from everything except the one absorbing thought of His overshadowing presence. In this way, you will become receptive, and healing will flow through the body, mind, and soul. When not meditating, if you wish for an intellectual understanding of the laws that govern healing, read and reread with concentration what Paramhansji has written in Scientific Healing Affirmations. Note that he says matter does not exist in the way we usually conceive it. Nevertheless, it does exist as a delusion. Do not therefore strengthen the delusion by allowing your consciousness to dwell on the body. When you meditate, let not the thought of your physical needs come between you and Him, who is the author of your being, the giver of every good and perfect gift, including that of healing. With love in God and Guruji, Sister Gyanamata. Again, a very short letter, but so relatable. And she says, for every difficulty, one answer, turn yourself, your consciousness, and fill it with God. And it reminded me of a story when I read this. You might have heard different versions of this story. It is of Kunti from the Mahabharata, who was the mother of three Pandavas. And at one point in her life, she was, grief stricken because her children were banished to the forest. And essentially what happened was she was so much in sorrow that she started praying and praying and praying. And what happened in the process was very, very interesting. In the process of praying, she completely forgot about her sorrows, and what she was filled with was complete inner joy. And at this stage, after all this praying, what happens? Lord Krishna appears to Kunti and he gives her a boon. He says, ask for something, whatever you want. And what does Kunti ask? She asks for suffering. And she says, because it is through suffering that I'm always reminded of you. And it might seem like, wait a second, really? Why would anyone pray for suffering? But it is again, in the context of karma, sometimes someone has written a message telling, please, can you tell the page number? I will soon. So anyways, coming back to the context of why would someone in his right sense of mind ask for suffering? But who knows? Once maybe when we are in suffering, let's try praying. Let's really listen to this letter from Sister Gyanamata, where she says, let's give everything to God. Let's turn towards God and fill our consciousness with his, or if you pray to God as Divine Mother, with her consciousness. And at that point, we will be so much overpowered by that joy that no suffering. And in fact, suffering might even be a bonus, like Swami Kriyananda ji often used to say in the context of karma. Our thinking of karma is when we suffer, it's bad karma. When we or if not for our context, at least for me, suffering was always bad karma. And, when I'm happy and having a good time, it's good karma. But my mind was blown when he explained good karma and bad karma in the context of every time when we are pulled closer to God, it is good karma. And every time when we are drawn away from God, it is bad karma. And so, yes, I might be enjoying a good movie or having a very good time in a party, and I might think it's good karma, but it need not necessarily be so, because I'm just going farther and farther away from God. But at the same time, if I just, have difficulties, like in this case, Kunti did, or Sister Gyanamata did, or as all saints have had gone through physical sufferings, or sometimes even been attacked, but at the same time, if we are drawn closer and closer and closer to God, then how does it matter what suffering, what trials, what tests? And in this context, I also wanted to bring Swami Kriyananda's life in mind, because he had gone through a lot of suffering, whether it be physical, whether his own dear and near ones betraying him, attacking him. And yet, nearing the end of his life, or in the later phase of his life, in a chapter, in an essay which he wrote, Why I Love My Guru Paramahansa Yogananda, these were his words. He hasn't made the way easy, unless indeed I consider as I do that every hardship has become in the end a supernal blessing. So I can think of no experience in my life that has not ended in sweetness, in an expansion of love, and in deep gratefulness. And these words, which struck really hard for me, was forgiveness for wrongs, hurts, and betrayals, tests, question mark. All I can say is, what tests, what betrayals, what hurts, and what wrongs? They were never wrongs personally to me. And so that is how every test, every trial, and every betrayal, you might say, and I have to say all these words in quotes, because like Swamiji said, what tests, what trials, what betrayals? And again, if we give everything to God, to gurus, this is what the response eventually is. At a time when he was going through the hardest test in his life, Swami Kriyanandaji, he wrote to Anandmayi Ma, asking for counsel, seeking help. And what did Anandmayi Ma reply to him? She said, take it as your guru's blessings or your guru's grace. And he thought, grace? That's the one thing I cannot think of. but yet it proved to be the biggest blessing in his life. So, friends, no matter what tests, no matter what trials, and what sufferings come in our life, let's take them in the highest. And again, just to repeat that line, it's worth reading it again and again. One answer will cover all your questions. Turn to God and fill your consciousness with the realization of His perfection. In other words, just say, God, God, God. And with that, I would like to invite Brahmachari Premdas to share some on the topic of God alone.
Thank you, Vineet. That was very inspiring. And thank you, friends, for joining us this evening. And I think we are all in this particular time where we all need strength. And now this topic seems so much more relevant, that where do we draw our strength from? So we draw our strength from God. And when we do that, we'll be able to help even other people. So all of you, all of us have to just tune in right now, and we have to be this warriors of light in a way that we can first feel His joy and share His joy as the world around us is undergoing a healing, new changes, all these things are happening. So, friends, today this thought came to me that usually whenever I take a long journey or travel in bus or flight, I always think, what do I do then? So usually many times I try to memorize a nice song or Master Swamiji or something on those lines. So this time I'd recently been to Bangalore, and during the flight, when I was going, this was the song called God, God, God. So I would also like to say that when about this song, that the words of this song, Paramahansa Yogananda ji told us, were received by him during a lecture from Saint Francis of Assisi. And Swamiji one day received this melody as he was waking from sleep, and he had asked his guru to give it to him so that he may share these inspiring words more widely. So I would just request you all now, as I request Bara to also share the words, and also as soon as he'll be sharing the song, for us all to close our eyes. And this song has like seven small paragraphs, and it just tells from morning to evening how to keep our mind and everything, energy, soul, everything on God. So please, let's all close our eyes, try to tune into these words so deeply so that He fills our consciousness.
From the depths of slumber as I ascend the spiral stairways of wakefulness, I will whisper, whisper, God, God, God. Thou art the food, and when I break my fast of nightly separation from thee, I will taste thee and mentally say, God, God, God. No matter where I go, the spotlight of my mind will ever keep turning on thee. And in the battle din of activity, my silent war cry will be, God, God, God. When boisterous storms of trial shriek, and when worries howl at me, I will drown their noises loudly chanting, God, God, God. When my mind weaves dreams, dreams, with threads of memories, On that magic cloth will I emboss God, God, God. Every night in time of deepest sleep, when my peace dreams and calls, joy, joy, my joy comes singing evermore. God, God, God. In waking, eating, working, dreaming, sleeping, serving, meditating, chanting, divinely loving, my soul will constantly hum, unheard by any. God, God, God.
Thank you, Master Saint Francis, Swamiji. Yeah. This silence is what Sister Gyanamata liked. And and many times, whenever she used to communicate with others, it was through the letters. She said at least that would inspire and that would stay longer, even when she was not here. I think thank you for her treasures of these letters in this book. So I would just like to read this from the same book. I do not know the page number, but during her passing, after her passing, Paramahansa Yogananda ji said this. Paramahansa Yogananda ji commented on this in a talk some years later. I never gave sister a robe, but inside she's a true renunciant. She's filled with the love divine. She has conquered within. On one occasion, some guests arrived at the hermitage at 2 o'clock in the morning. I called for sister and asked her, could you give up your room for these guests? Instantly she answered, oh yes, with the greatest willingness. So I said to her, sister, you sleep in my study. And she remained quiet. I did not understand then why she was quiet. 3 days later, where do you think I found she had been sleeping? She had taken an old army coat I'd placed it in the laundry room. Sister, I asked her, why did not you sleep in my study? She replied, I did not want to blaspheme it. I told her, rather you would sanctify it. This just tells I think there's so much we can learn from her lessons about just the right attitude and the way of offering herself completely to Master and showing all of us the way. And also, after her passing, Paramahansa Yogananda ji stated that God had told him, this was with regards to the suffering and all she had gone through, and Master and Heavenly Father, they used to converse with each other. And God had told Paramahansa Yogananda ji, 20 years of suffering never took away her love from me. 20 years of suffering never took away her love from me, and that is what I prize in her life. This is Heavenly Father telling to Master about her life. And also in the pages, as Vineet was saying about how it's so helpful for us to strengthen our discipleship by reading this book. And it was even in her life. Even her husband, Mr. Bissett, I think, if I rightly pronounce it, even he, like 3 months before his passing, he had brought Sister Gyanamata to Mount Washington. She told to Master, please take her. She's sister. He referred to her as sister, and he said that please take her in. And Paramahansa Yogananda ji said, what will you do? Why are you doing this? And he said, her husband said, in 3 months I'm leaving. And by then there was no such medical condition that was really proved, but in 3 months, as his word, he left his body. And sister later moved to Mount Washington. So her whole life, and even when Master was saying about looking through her whole life and she did not find a single fault, she had spiritualized everything and offered it everything to divine. And there's one more thing here. And also this again about suffering. Thank you, Vineet. This topic and how it really changes our perspective. Through her suffering, she helped others is a subtitle. It's from the same book. The reader may wonder why such a saintly individual had to go through the prolonged suffering that Gyanamata did. Paramahansa Yogananda ji explained, her suffering was because of the sins of many others who became saintly through her life. There was not a sin of her own I could find. I want you to know that such is the mystery of God. Just these words about how it just opens our mind when saints try to take on the suffering of others, because they know they have cleared their own karma, and now for them it's more like how they can help their disciples who are almost there to take them also on this path. And as Brahmachari Vineet was telling about the Makunti story, I also was reminded of Draupadi's, and how in many ways there was this one comparison where there was a time when I think Lord Krishna had asked Draupadi to practice yoga, because we all know from Bhagavad Gita that compared to wisdom or this or that, be thou a yogi, or Arjuna is what Lord Krishna says. And for Draupadi, when Lord Krishna asks her to practice this thing, and Draupadi replies like, how can I take my mind away from you to even practice yoga? So in the same way, Sister Gyanamata, this was just before her passing, she had asked Master for the highest experience of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. This was just before when Master had requested God to still keep her on this planet. And then Sister, when the conversation between Master and Sister Gyanamata took place, and when Sister requested him for the Nirvikalpa experience, Samadhi experience. And Master said, I'm paraphrasing, I need to look at it. So Master said, I saw in a vision that she was close with God. So, and he said, why do you need that experience when you're already inside the palace, and you don't have to go to the garden anymore? You're already inside the palace. So many times we might think of these things, and just this words of Master and for Sister Gyanamata, that just becoming one with God, and somehow the experiences will come or will not come, but somehow if we somehow keep God alone, and somehow He'll take care of our families, that all of us have seen through these trials that are happening right now, that how God is able to even protect their families, and even if they have to give their bodies, it's out of joy, and there is a lot of peace and blessings for all the family members of devotees. So Lord Krishna, our masters, gurus, don't only take care of us and everyone involved around us also. So I think this is almost time, and thank you all for joining us. And let's all increase the light. And thank you, Vineet, and thank you, Barashamni, for organizing these things. And thank you all for supporting this. And let's take this into our hearts, and let's go strong with God.